Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be making over this MCM bookshelf. There's just a little spot at the back and it is missing some glass. I've seen some pictures online showing this exact piece with glass. This one did not come with it. I picked it up on the side of the road for spring cleanup and we're going to give it a whole new makeover. I have to say it's really nice having a piece that doesn't have hardware, so we're just going to start out with vacuuming it first. I'm just using some Simple Green all-purpose cleaner with really hot water. That's why I like wearing gloves, so I can use the hottest water I can get, and then afterwards I do wipe it down with clean water. There was something stuck to this part of the shelf, so I just wrapped my cloth around a multi-tool to scratch it off and then used the same tool and cloth to get into the cracks where the glass would have been. Before I cleaned the top, I just flipped it upside down so that way it was easier to get underneath of the shelves. As I was trying to clean the bottom of the bookshelf, there was these weird staples that had no purpose at all, so it caught on my cloth, and now I'm just kind of prying them out to make sure that everything is smooth and no one's going to get hurt lifting it up. Before I flip this piece up, I just cleaned the legs, and this has happened to me about 3 times where I almost knock over my phone while I'm trying to film, and luckily I have crazy karate skills. I was able to grab it. No, I don't have any karate skills, but I did manage to catch it before it fell. I typically don't paint the backs of my pieces if they're in good condition, but I do want to give it a good wash because it was outside, so it had a little bit of a smell. Just want to make sure I'm cleaning that properly before selling it. Once everything's dry, I'm just using a 220 grit sandpaper to scuff sand the surface. This is a laminate finish, so it's not solid wood, so I want to give it a really good scuff sand so that way my paint has something to adhere to. For me, this is the easiest way to sand off furniture legs. I just kind of roll it on my leg and it worked out really well. And then once I was done that, I just hand sanded all of the crevices and the legs again, just to make sure everything was all smooth. In order to repair this corner, I'm just using some quick wood. This is a really great option when you need to mold it. So it's a 2-part where you just mix together the 2 parts until you get a cohesive color and then shape it to the shape that you want. In order to get a perfectly square edge, I just use a popsicle stick just to shape it a little bit better than my hands. And since I had a little bit extra, I just filled some holes that I had seen around the piece as well. For the backer board, I just used some all-purpose wood filler. As soon as you open any type of wood filler, it immediately starts drying. So it's always a good idea to take whatever you need out and put it on a separate piece of cardboard, so that way your wood filler lasts longer. Once all the wood filler dried, I just took the same 220 grit sandpaper to smooth everything out and shape that corner. After any sanding, you always want to wipe back that dust with a damp rag. I went to Home Depot and picked up these panels. I had them cut them to size. I decided to go with these panels versus glass, as I do prefer an enclosed cabinet. And as always, I'm using Zinsser's Bin Shellac Base Primer. I'm only using the Zinsser's Bin Shellac Base Primer in a can for the corners, and the reason for that is because I'm cheap, and I'm cheap in the sense where it doesn't compromise quality. I say that because the spray can costs more than the primer, and I do always buy the 3-liter can of primer because you are spending more when you buy less, and since I use the same primer and the same top coat on practically every piece that I do, I just save a little bit more money by buying more. And today I just didn't feel like dealing with the corners with my roller, so it was just easier for me to use the spray can, and obviously you can use the spray can on the entire piece, totally up to you. This is just what I decided to do. I'm using a 4-inch microfiber roller for this primer, and I do reuse it, so I just keep it in my fridge between projects. To make sure everything's smooth for paint, I'm just taking a fine grit sanding sponge and going over the entire piece. And since I sanded, I'm just wiping back any dust with a damp rag. For the legs, I'm using Varathane Golden Oak. I'm not using a wood conditioner just because the wood grain on these legs are not very prominent, so I think that the wood stain should be able to absorb properly, and it did turn out great, so I just wiped back the excess and I only needed one coat. I let the wood stain dry so that way the smell wasn't as strong when I bring it inside to paint, and I'm just using House and Canvas in Underground. Again, starting with the doors, since that way it's just quicker. I have to flip them, so it always takes longer, so it's always good to do the doors first. I forgot to turn this piece upside down first, so I did end up doing it afterwards, but it's always easier to start with a piece upside down, especially when you have to paint underneath. But since I already started, I didn't feel like flipping it, so I just did it like this. Dealing with a bunch of corners, it's always a good idea to keep an eye out for any drips that can happen, especially since I left the backer board on. I just didn't want to risk ruining the backer board, so I kept it on, but you can easily get drips around the back, so I did periodically check to make sure no drips were happening. To avoid any drips or brush strokes or roller marks, you always want to do thin light coats because you can always add another coat on top if you're not getting full coverage. I ended up doing 2 full coats and then some touch-ups, so about 2.5 coats total to get full coverage. I let the piece dry overnight before I came back with a fine grit sanding sponge and knock down any texture after the first coat. I'll leave a link in the description so that way you guys know what products I'm using. For the second coat, I remembered to flip it upside down, and you can see there are some spots that I missed, so it's always a good idea to have your piece flipped upside down so that way you get a full picture of what your piece looks like. And halfway through this project, I actually got some lights that I ordered on Amazon, and I'm going to show you guys how much of a difference it's actually made. I'll link them in the description for you as well. I'm surprised that they were so bright. I didn't expect it, but I really love it, and I hope that it makes your guys' viewing experience better. So if you do like this video so far, please leave me a like and subscribe, and I would truly appreciate it. This is without the lights, and that's with one light on, and then I'm just turning the other one on so that way you guys can see it's so much brighter. And that's my setup where I try not to trip and knock stuff over. Now that everything's dry, I'm finally ready to top coat using my favorite Varathane Diamond Wood finish in satin, and I just mixed a little bit of the paint with it so that way it reduces any streakiness or hazing that's common with this type of top coat. Once I was done top coating the drawers and they were all dry, I drilled a hole for the hardware off camera. It was really hard to get into all the corners with this type of top coat. It definitely added a lot of excess, so I just had a brush to be able to get out any drips and clumps that could have been building up in the corner. Off camera, I top coated the legs using the clear top coat, and I did a total of 2 coats over the entire piece and 3 coats on any of the shelves and the top where things might get set on. As with all my pieces, I like to put furniture pads so that way it doesn't scratch up their floor as well as my floor while I'm moving it around. And to make sure the doors slide really smoothly, I'm just using an artist brush and some Dixie Belle's Best Dang Wax to get into the cracks there. I also did it on the top part as it will slide on both the bottom and the top. Now that we're finally done, let's take another look at the before. And now here's the after.